Hello, everyone. You can hear that I've kind of lost my voice again. I've been kind of perpetually sick. That's not very good amidst the coronavirus pandemic. But fortunately, it's not the coronavirus. Now, we're going to start out by doing something slightly different, and this is just a kind of a suggestion for you. You don't really have to follow it. But I would suggest that you use earbuds for this lesson. Why? Well, because when we are in the Module 16 Reproductive System, something that might be age appropriate for you as advanced anatomy students may not be so age appropriate for your immature 8th grade sibling or likewise 7th, 6th, whatever. And I'm sure that somehow it's going to get out, these videos on YouTube, and everybody's going to watch them, but that's okay if they do. It's really not secretive stuff. Just the reproductive system, of course, isn't really talked about too much in a Christian school, and it makes it things you don't talk about, things that are maybe a little secretive, get to be things that people are really curious about. So anyway, we're going to start Module 16 on the reproductive system today, and and just like a normal system, the reproductive is one of your systems of your body. It is, however, the only one that is non-essential. You can live without it, technically, but I would say that it is the system that is probably the most interesting, at least, how God designed it, because He designed it to facilitate life, something that has baffled scientists and philosophers and politicians for millennia. What is life? Why are we here? And we're going to talk a little bit also in this lecture about some philosophical stuff from abortion, the merits and political side of abortion as women's rights, and how that's proposed and how that's really not the truth. Although that is a highly opinionated thing, I think we can make a case medically. Well, anyway, let's start with the reproductive system. We have to start, before we get into anything macroscopic, we have to start with DNA at meiosis. So remember, mitosis and meiosis differ. Mitosis creates an exact genetic replica. Meiosis creates variation, and that's good. And the reason why it's good is because you don't want to be an exact genetic replica of your parents. And some of you already see yourself in them, and you're like, whoa, I look too much like my mom. But anyway, sexual reproduction attempts to vary the genetic code, not from what is originally there. You can only use what's there. But it tries to select a variety, and 23 chromosomes come from your dad, 23 from your mom, forming 23 pairs of chromosomes. And you could potentially, now I'm going to try and illustrate this, and it's going to be kind of a losing battle. So here's 2 chromosomes. Here's your dad's. We're going to label that D. And here's mom's. Here's 2 chromosomes from your mom. And this is, let's say, the 3rd pair. And let's say, for sake of illustration, the 3rd pair contains information for eye color, hair color, and skin color. We're going with colors today. Now, your dad inherited these from his mom and his dad. So this is his mom and his dad's, his mom and your mom's mom and your mom's dad. And they're selected randomly. So potentially you could get your dad's chromosome and your mom's dad's chromosome and literally not get any genetic information from either your dad's mom or your mom's mom. And so you don't have any genetic information from them. And that's kind of unique. Sometimes there's crossing over where part of your dad's chromosome switches with another part of his chromosome. So you get kind of a hybrid of your dad's parents. I mean, you ever heard of something that skips a generation? I mean, it's potentially true, where something that your dad inherited from his dad wasn't seen because he inherited something from his mom that masked the behavior, because this would be recessive and this was dominant. And then he passed down his other chromosome, and so you have this recessive trait, whereas he showed the dominant trait. Interesting stuff. Females have 2 X chromosomes. That's the last pair of chromosomes, whereas males have 1 X, 1 Y. These chromosomes control the biological sex. Of course, there are some variations in this. Klinefelter syndrome, 2 X's and a Y. We're talking about a technically biological male that is very effeminate. We're not talking like gay necessarily, because that doesn't have, as it appears right now, genetic origin. But we are talking about size, voice, etc. There's also trisomy X, where you have 3 X chromosomes. You have a female that's very female, or females that are born with 1 X chromosome. All these people are infertile, and they rarely happen, probably once out of every 3,000 people or so. Anyway, the other 44 chromosomes are called autosomes, determine genetic traits, and you inherit one from your mom, one from your dad. Homologous chromosomes are the basis of Mendelian genetics. We should be somewhat familiar with Gregor Mendel, where if you have 2 dominant traits, you're going to show the dominant trait. If you have 1 dominant, 1 recessive, you're going to show the dominant trait. And if you have 2 recessive, you're going to show the recessive trait. And so consider if you have what's called a... Sorry, I keep getting messages on Skype. If you have what's called heterozygous dominant, that means you have 2 different traits, but you're dominant, and so does your spouse who you have a child with. Your child will have 1/4 of a chance of having 2 dominant traits, 2/4 of a chance of having a dominant and recessive, and 1/4 of having a completely recessive trait. And if your child inherits this 1/4 of a chance, I mean, it's potentially it has potential to cause something vastly different. And I think even about hair color. Like my daughter has blonde hair, bleach blonde, and I have brown hair, and my wife has brown hair. But my father has blonde hair. My mother, my wife's mom has blonde hair. And so my child probably got that 1/4 of a chance of having blonde hair. Now, there's a lot more genes that control hair color. It's not just one, so I'm not going to try and dumb it down. I have to take this Skype call. I'll be right back. So anyway, we're moving on from meiosis to the male reproductive system. We're going to do the male reproductive system today. Some background here. Sexual reproduction produces new individuals. Gametes, a general term for reproductive cells, sperm and egg, formed by the testes and ovaries. Purpose of sexual reproduction is for fertilization. Biologically, that is. Fertilization produces one cell. It's called a zygote. So sperm and egg, they combine, forming a zygote with one set of chromosomes from each parent. Hopefully, in a human, that sperm cell has 23 chromosomes, the egg cell has 23 chromosomes when they combine, the zygote has 46, has all the genetic information it needs for life. We're going to talk about that later. Creates genetic variation. Gonads produce gametes and secrete sex hormones. Gonads are sex organs, general name for them. The reproductive system, studied under gynecology for females and urology for males. Of course, urology combines the urinary and reproductive, since the males use the same tract for both, whereas females it's different tracts. Let's start out with the male reproductive system. Your book gets really wildly graphic. This is like the PG-13 version, I think. So of course, if you want to consult more, you can take a look at your textbook. They skip no such awkward thing. They go through all of it. It's funny. Anyway, male reproductive anatomy. You have testes forming the sperm. Bladder. Oh, it doesn't have the arrow to the bladder. It will. Surrounding the testes is the epididymis, which matures sperm after they grow. And then there's this tube. It's called the vas deferens. It transports sperm that are working to the seminal vesicle, which kind of houses the sperm that have been made. And the prostate, which is this gland here, the prostate stores the semen that's made and processed at the seminal vesicle. Now you can see here, now the bladder points to this thing here. You can see here that the bladder and the prostate both use the same tube to exit the body, which is unique to males. Of course, you have the penis for sexual stimulation and urine removal. And, oh, there you go. And there's all my arrows. And the urethra is the general canal for urine and sperm to exit the body. And lastly, the scrotum is the sac containing the testes. And that concludes the at least anatomical portion of male anatomy. I had to go back and clip the video because I went over time. I forgot I only have 15 minutes. Let's go through this quicker. Spermatogenesis is where the sperm forms. It requires a cooler temperature, and that's why the testes aren't inside the body. They're outside of the body. It needs about 95 degrees. There's actually a muscle which regulates the distance from the body. Sperm mixed with various other fluids to create semen, a fructose-rich basic fluid. And it needs to be basic because the vaginal pathways are acidic, and it couldn't survive if it was acidic. It needs to have fructose because it takes a lot of energy to reach the egg. In fact, it takes about 2 to 3 days worth of energy, even though 99.9% of the sperm will die in search for it. All right, that's the end of this video. Tune in tomorrow as we continue the male reproductive and then the female reproductive systems.